think we can get started. Hope I'm visible and audible to everyone. Right. Okay. So what I will do is I will share my screen. So I have a presentation ready for today's session, and I will take everyone through its content, and we can proceed. Okay. So let me share my screen. Right. Perfect. All right. So welcome to the BMS exam preparation session, right? So I believe there would be students from the V-Learning class as well as some other students who have joined in, all preparing for the exams coming up towards the end of this month and early next month, right? So my name is Pasan. I have been the BMS lecturer for AAT English medium for approximately 10 years now, right? So just a little bit about myself. Maybe uh, some of you guys would not have an idea who I am. So I, I was mostly involved in the physical classes all the way up until recently, where I shifted to overseas, right? But nevertheless, I'm conducting classes virtually, right? And myself, a little bit about me. I also did AAT exams just like you guys, right? So this was a long time ago, approximately like 10, 12 years ago, right? So when I did the exams, yes, I was also similarly studying, right? Back then, we had AAT 1, 2, 3, similar to what it is currently, maybe a few different subjects, right? So I completed my AAT exams while doing A levels, just like you guys, most of you guys, right? And I got selected to uni, but that's not the path I pursued. I directly went into chartered accountancy. So I became a chartered accountant and I moved overseas after that, right? So that's my story. So I'm sure you guys are also trying to pursue something similar, right? So we can get started right away. Okay. So we start off with the objectives of today's session, right? So first being, we have to first understand the paper structure, right? So some of you guys who have been doing past papers already, you would have a fair understanding about how the paper structure would be. But for the benefit of everyone, I will just take you through the structure of the paper and how the marks have been distributed in each of these sections, right? And how we are supposed to tackle each of these sections, right? That is the first part of today's session. Second part would be the past paper analysis, right? This is the most important aspect of today's session, right? So as you may be aware, in our paper, how the examiner is testing each of the syllabus contents, right? So once we analyze the past papers, we would have a fair understanding as to how the how each of these units are being tested at the exam, in what questions and what are the types of questions the examiner usually tests, right? So that should be the analysis. Then we will be discussing some target questions for your paper, right? So the good news is that your paper is very easy to predict in the sense that I cannot give you exactly what the question would be, but at least it's very easy to figure out the pattern as to what sections and what type of questions are being tested in your paper, right? So based on that understanding, based on my experience as well as my past paper analysis, we will be doing some target questions. And lastly, the Q&A session. This is a open-ended session, right? So even starting from now itself, right? If you guys have any questions, you can drop it into the chat, right? So at the Q&A session, I can pick those up and I can give you the answers. It can be anything related to the exam, any questions you might have, right? So this would be an open interactive session, right? So that's the plan for the day, right? So we will start off with understanding the paper structure. Okay. So we have section A that would have approximately 15 questions, right? And a total mark allocation of 40 marks, right? So here you will have MCQ questions where you are supposed to select the correct answer out of 4 options, and there could be OTQs. Those are objective type questions, right? Where you have to mark write the exact answer that the examiner wants, right? So for this you will get 40 marks, right? Then section B would be writing questions where you would be presented with 4 questions, right? And you will get 40 marks for that section. So here each question would carry 10 marks, right? And that into 4, you will get 40 marks. And lastly, there would be question C, section C, which will have only 1 question, which will give you a total of 20 marks, right? So the takeaway of this section is that, of course, you guys would know this, right? This is common across the board. But what needs to be elaborated in the sense that for me to emphasize would be the time management part of it. The මේකට කොහොමද වාගේ පැය තුන balance කරගන්නේ. ඒක තමයි ඔයා මුලින්ම ඔළුවට දාගන්න ඕන දේ, right? So for example, when you are writing this exam in 3 hours, that would be 180 minutes roughly, right? So within this 180 minutes, you are supposed to score 100 marks, right? So that what that implies is that you have to earn 1 mark at a rate of 1.8 minutes, right? So එක ලකුණක් ගන්න ඔයාට විනාඩි 1.8යි ගන්න පුළුවන්, right? I hope it makes sense, right? So what it means is that, one second, guys, sorry. So what it means is that this rate is very important for you. For example, in section A, you have 40 marks, right? So may 40 marks ටික ඔයාට ගන්න to achieve these 40 marks or score these 40 marks, the maximum number of minutes you can allocate would be 1.8 into 40. Correct? So this is roughly working out to be around how much? Around 1 hour or so, right? So this approximation is important for you. For example, when you start question A, right? Section 1, section A, you should not be stuck in that section for an extended period of time because there's more marks to be scored in section B and C, right? So what you need to do is make sure that you complete this section A within an hour or so, right? So that's my recommendation, right? So here you can score for maybe 1 hour, right? 1 second. I'm having a difficulty with my pointer. It's a technical glitch, sorry. Yeah, okay, there we go. So here, what I was saying is that let's try to wrap this up in 1 hour, right? Make a packing, section A, right? Don't spend more time than 1 hour, right? You might complete the section earlier, or you might not complete all the questions, right? But the hard stop would be 1 hour for this, right? That way you can go to the next sections where you can score even more marks, okay? And in section B, what needs to happen is, so I told you that there are 4 questions here, right? 10 marks each per question. So එතකොට section B එකේ එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් attempt කරන්න ඔයා ගන්න ඕන minutes ගාන තමයි 10 into 1.8, right? So this will give you maybe 18 minutes. That means roughly 20 minutes. විනාඩි 20ක් තමයි ඔයාලට ගන්න පුළුවන් එක question එකකට, right? So assume you start the question and you get a sense that okay, this question is a little bit tricky. I don't have enough time to attempt it, right? Maybe it will take more time than this 18-minute threshold, right? So don't waste like half an hour, 40 minutes on 10 marks, right? There could be questions that are easier to attempt later down the line, right? So approximately make sure that you attempt one of these questions in section B, right? The questions 4 එකක් attempt කරනවා විනාඩි 10කට වැඩිය ගන්න එපා. Roughly, right? Can be 20 minutes, 25 minutes, plus or minus, it is fine. Like with a small deviation, but not extensive, right? And in question C, this would be the 20-mark question. 20-mark question, right? So it would be 1.8 into 20. This would be roughly 36 minutes. Okay. So the reason I am stressing this is that I have observed some of these students when they start the paper, they try to their time management is not that great, right? So for the same paper, one student comes to me and says that, sir, the paper was very easy. I managed the time well. And another guy who attempted the same exam comes up to me saying that, sir, I didn't have time to attempt section C at all, right? So make sure that you have this rough idea in your mind before you go to the exam paper. So manage your time properly. That will be very critical in your maths exam. Okay. Right. So that is out of our way. You know the structure of your paper, right? Now coming into the past paper analysis, right? So now this is what we are going to do. So as you can see, I have analyzed 7 past papers here, right? All the way from January 2022. As you know, there are 2 papers per year. So from 2022, July, Jan 23, July 2023, and 2 papers in 24. And your most recent paper would be January 2025, right? So based on this analysis, you can identify what are the key areas that are going to be tested in the exam in each of these sections, right? So guys, remember, what we are going to analyze now is not section A. Then sections තුනක් තියෙනවානේ, right? So what we are going to analyze is not this particular section. මේක focus කරන්න අමාරු because it's MCQs, right? MCQs can be tested from any corner of your syllabus, right? But the good news is for this 60 marks, that is 40 plus 20, මේ ලකුණු 60 you can forecast very clearly, right? So analysis and the focus of today's session would be this second part, this written part. Okay. So keep that in mind. By keeping that in mind, let's go to our analysis now. Then make it in my papers to analyze what are the patterns we can observe, right? In section B and C. Okay. So this is a lot of information, right? But not to worry, I will explain what this is, and then you can make out what I am trying to show here, right? So it's pretty easy. Okay, so follow. Now, on the left side of this table, you see your syllabus areas. So how many areas are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, right? So these are the core syllabus areas for your exam, right? So for each of these syllabus areas, against that, I have plotted in the question number of each of these past papers and how many marks have been given by the examiner, right? So the way you have to read this would be, so for basic mathematics for business, the syllabus area in January 52, right? You have this question 2. In that, from this particular syllabus area, you could score 7 marks. A section එකෙන් ඔයාලට ලකුණු 7ක් ගන්න පුළුවන්කම තිබ්බා, right? And in July 22, same question, 10 marks. Jan 23, same question number, 10 marks. Likewise, it has been always been 10 marks across the board, right? මේක හැම වෙලේම ලකුණු 10ක ප්‍රශ්නයක්. Financial mathematics, it's also tested in question number 6, always, okay? And the number of marks can vary. It can be around 10 marks. It can go all the way up until 14 marks, roughly. Financial operative measures, it's a very standard question. Always it is tested on a question number 3. For how many marks? 10 marks. Okay. Data representation and descriptive measures, always tested under question number 5 of your paper, right? Liana Prashnavala, question number 5. Always it is how many marks? 10 marks, right? Comparative quantitative variables, question number 4, it is almost always 10 marks, right? Probability is tested under question number 6, right? And the number of marks can vary from 6, 7 marks all the way up until level marks, right? And index numbers and forecasting, this area for some reason, the examiner does not give much prominence in the part 2 of your paper, right? Part 2 in the sense that is section B and C, right? Rantima sections deke index numbers and forecasting they don't test it as much, right? So in the history, the only question that I could see was from Jan 2022, which was tested for 3 months, right? So now you know how the syllabus areas are being tested, in which question, and the approximate number of marks that you can get for each of these sections, right? So why is this important? The may table like the benefit. What information can you digest from this, right? So based on this information, you can get a clear idea as to, okay, for the syllabus area that I'm studying right now, let's say you are studying financial operative measures for business, right? Before you go to the exam, you know, in question number 3, this topic will be tested, right? For how many marks? 10 marks, right? So that way you can secure your marks, you can target the achievement of your marks even before you go to the exam, right? Then we pass and try we all try to pass the exam somehow, right? So for the pass mark, let's say 50 marks, right? You know, to get there, how many questions that I need to get through at least, right? To get to that 50 mark score. This plus your MCQ answers, right? So with this information, you can then go into the detailed content of the syllabus areas, right? Then what make a දැක්කම then the පුළුවන් අයියෝ මේක කියන්නද අපි exam prep session එකක් කරන්න. This is very easy to figure out, right? Yeah, it is. It is very easy to figure out, right? You can do this analysis on your own, right? But what we are going to do is, even within the syllabus areas, we are going to pinpoint what are the specific subsections or specific questions that the examiner always tests, right? So this exam that you do, AAT level 1, is a very easy exam to predict, right? Then I will show it to you based on the detailed analysis of the past papers, right? Which I like to call the deep dive analysis, right? So before I go there, I want to show you something, right? Similar to what you guys are doing right now. You are in this exam prep session, right? So the guys who did the exams back in January 25, right? January will exam liyapu batch එක කට්ටිය, they also similarly took part in an exam prep session with me, right? So what I'm going to show you is what are the areas that we targeted for the study and did practice questions, right? Versus the actual. What exactly the examiner tested during this most recent paper, right? So I will show this to you. This is not to like a show off or show out or anything. This is just to give you the confidence that what we are doing makes sense, right? So let me show you. Section A, the first syllabus area was basic mathematics for business. Okay. So in my exam preparation session, I told them that, okay, these are the things that you will need to focus on, right? When we say basic mathematics, it can go from BODMAS all the way up until ratios. There are so many different things, right? But the examiner loves to test these specific things, okay? So if you studied these particular bullet points, you could have obtained 6 out of 10 marks from the forecast alone, right? So there are 4 marks missing here that was relating to inequalities, right? But nevertheless, majority of the marks you could get or you could score if you were savvy with these particular subsections of this area, right? That's it. Number 2, financial mathematics for business, right? When we say financial mathematics for business, what is this area? This area was about what? This area was about how you compute interest, right? Poliya ganane karna vidya, right? So you had simple interest, compound interest, effective interest, right? Then project appraisal, present value formulas, right? Loan amortization. There are so many things, right? But these 4 are the key things or the areas that the examiner likes to test, right? So similar to you guys, I explained these facts to the previous batch, right? Focus on these areas under financial mathematics for business. So if you did that prep properly, you could have obtained all the marks allocated under this section, right? Or may ආපු ප්‍රශ්න වලට ඔක්කොම ලකුණු ටික ගන්න තිබ්බා. That is 13 marks. That's a lot of marks, right? So next, financial operative measures for business, right? What is this syllabus area? Financial operative measures. Can you remember that section where we talked about total revenue formula, total cost formula, total profit, right? Then something called break-even point, profit maximization, right? Marginal formulas. There was a syllabus area like that, right? Okay. So from that area, if you really did your prep along these 4 types of questions, you are through 10 marks straight away, right? Data representation and descriptive measures, right? This section, if I remind you what it is, right? So you had a computation of what? The measures of central tendency, that is mean, median, and mode, right? And measures of dispersion, right? The spread of a data set, that would be coefficient of variation, variance, right? Standard deviation. Then we drew a lot of charts, pie charts, then other ways of data distribution. We had graphs, right? We had bar charts, so scatter diagrams, many things, right? Keeping all that aside, if you at least did your prep so that you know how to calculate mean, median, standard deviation, coefficient of variation, and pie chart was something I targeted last time. So from this mean, median, standard deviation, the sections I have marked in bold, right? If you did your prep and knew how to compute those, all the marks, easy peasy, right? Next, comparing to quantitative variables. This one is, how do I say? There's no guesswork here, right? In this section. Comparing to quantitative variables, Pudha, they always ask only one question. What is that? Compute the least square regression analysis, right? And do a forecast based on that. If you don't believe me, you can check any of the past papers under that particular syllabus area, right? That in that question, they always ask you to compute the least square regression line and do a forecast, right? Everywhere, in all the papers, it's the same thing, right? So if you do it, you're good to go, 10 marks straight away, right? Then probability and its applications, right? So for probability, this also is a vast area, right? You have laws of probability, you have simple probability, you have conditional probability, expected values, standard normal curves. There are so many things that you have learned, right? Then Venn diagrams, many things, right? Whole heap of stuff. But I asked the gentleman who attended the exam last batch to take note on these areas. Laws of probability, how to do it for additive and multiplicative laws, right? Then the expected value and the standard normal curve, right? So if you were savvy with these areas, you could have obtained 7 out of 7 marks. That was tested in section 2, right? So all in all, guys, if you did your preparation along the lines or along the areas that I predicted, you could have obtained 56 out of 60 marks. This 4 marks missing was relating to inequalities, right? Inequalities was not a section that the examiner usually tests. That was something new. I didn't also foresee that they would do that, but they asked a question. But bar that, the rest, 56 marks out of 60. This is like 90% of everything that you could have scored in section B and C, right? We could predict properly, right? So what I'm trying to get to is, guys, the analysis that we have done and the identification of these specific areas that you need to look at is very beneficial for your exam, all right? So whatever said and done, at the end of the day, you could be studying from A to Z in your syllabus, right? That is fine. You can get a prize maybe. You can score 100 marks. But for you to get through the exams properly, right, your focus should be on these specific areas. All right. So Guys, you don't have to take a lot of notes or anything. I will give you this presentation, right? So you can have this analysis at your hand when you are studying for the exam, right? So now what we are going to do is for each of these areas, I'm going to show you what are the key areas that the examiner tests and how you're supposed to approach them. Okay. So I'm going to go one by one in detail. Okay. Now, first area that was relating to business mathematics, right? The basic mathematics for business. All right. So here, guys, the common areas that are tested are simple equations, simultaneous equations, product pricing, progressions, ratios and inequalities, fractions and percentages, right? So I will just brief you one by one what these things are, right? So now you have to understand something. From these things, right? If I say, not everyone is perfect, right? If I say, sir, I know simple equations, I know simultaneous equations, I'm okay with it, right? Ratios and inequalities, I'm also okay with it. Fractions and percentages, I'm okay with it, right? You have to do your own self-assessment, right? Once you do that, you know, okay, I am not very confident in product pricing. I cannot recall what margin and markups are. Okay. And progressions, arithmetic and geometric. When I'm referring to those subsections, if you cannot recollect what you have studied, please, those are the areas that you are supposed to study. Okay. Don't study the stuff that you already know. Then, if you can solve a simultaneous equation right now using your calculator as well as your formulas, right? It's highly likely that you can do the same in 3 weeks' time or 2 weeks' time when you sit for the exam, right? Most likely you can do it at the exam paper as well, right? In a short span of time, you are not going to forget it, right? But if you don't know something out of this list, please pinpoint them, right? And go back to your notes, go back to the videos, rewatch them, and make sure you know that area for sure, right? Because I'm not asking you to study the full thing, right? If you take basic mathematics, there's a massive scope, right? Within that, I want you to make sure that you know this stuff properly. Okay, right. So I cannot tell you, Putha, may set again. You have to study 2 out of this 7, or 3 out of this 7, or 7 out of 7, right? That is you, right? You would know for sure what are the stuff that you know and what are the stuff you cannot remember, right? So have that self-awareness, right? Don't have like a false pretense that, okay, I know everything about basic maths. No, if you don't remember anything, please go back and study only those specific areas. Don't scatter it. This is a 6 months course, right? We only have like a couple of weeks now. So your studies should be focused now, right? Focus on the stuff you don't know. Even within that, from this set, anything that you don't know, please make sure you go back and check that, right? Okay. If you know this stuff, 10 marks in your bag, right? Financial mathematics for business, right? Similarly, what are the common areas that they test, right? Loan installment calculation is a very famous question, right? And in the last exam prep session, that was my first question as well, right? I did a question in this session that we did for the last batch, right? The same question, they asked it straight away. That's the first question that they asked in question number 6, right? It came through as it is, right? So loan amortization, installment and amortization is a key area, right? Putha, what is this loan installment and amortization schedule? මොකක්ද මේ loan installment and amortization schedule කියන්නේ? We have a question later on, but I will give you a quick brief. This is where you compute the installment of a loan based on the value of the loan and the repayment period, right? So, for example, if you go to a bank and ask for a loan, right, you will tell the bank or the loan officer, මට රුපියල් ලක්ෂයක ණයක් ඕන. I need a loan of 100,000 rupees for a personal reason, right? So they will ask you, okay, sir, that, oh, madam, this is how long are you planning to obtain this loan for? කොච්චර කාලෙකින්ද ගෙවන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ, right? Then you might say, I will pay it off in 3 years, right? Okay. Then the banking officer or the loan officer, account he or she will do some math and tell you, okay, per month or per year, you are supposed to pay this much. They will give you a fixed amount, right? මාසයකට රුපියල් 7,500 ගානේ ගෙවාගෙන යන්න වෙනවා, right? They will give you the installment, right? වාරිකය කියන එක they compute, right? They compute this using some math, right? Okay, that's the exact thing that you are supposed to do as math students, right? That's the same calculation you are supposed to do, right? But not to worry, we will be doing a question later on in this session, right? And what you need to know is this is a very commonly tested area in your exam, right? Loan installment calculation, right? Then amortization schedule, also we will do a question today, not a problem. Then NPV, net present value. Guys, what was net present value? Can you remember something like this? Let's say you are receiving 100,000 rupees after, let's say, 5 years from now. Okay. So while saying that, the examiner will ask you to compute or calculate the present value, PV, of this cash flow, right? Cash flow, CF, right? So when the examiner tells you to calculate this cash flow, right? For the present value of this cash flow, what does that even mean, right? So what you need to remember is, guys, this 100,000 rupees is what we call is a future value. Anagata agya. It's a future value. Okay? Because you are not receiving this now, right? You're supposed to receive this when? 5 years from now. Right? So this amount is in the future. Therefore, we call it a future value, right? So that particular cash flow is worth how much as of date. Otherwise, how much would that be, right? Guys, the difference happens here because of inflation, right? Or phone you are going to buy a phone, right? So this particular phone, if you are buying today for, let's say, 100,000 rupees, right? If you are going to buy this phone today, it is 100,000, but a similar model in the future could be more expensive, right? Let's say iPhone 15, right? After 5 years, it would be iPhone 20 or something, right? So the price of that would be obviously higher, right? If you were to purchase certain goods and services today, right? For the same goods and services, you will have to spend more money in the future. Clear? So, for example, when I was small, a loaf of bread used to be like, I think maybe 20 bucks, right? So now can you buy a loaf of bread for 20 bucks in Sri Lanka? There's no way, right? It would be like, I don't know, maybe 100 bucks, 150. I'm also out of touch now, a little bit, right? But it's not 20 bucks anymore, right? So to buy the same loaf of bread, අවුරුදු 10ට කලින් කෑවත් පාන් දැන් කෑවත් පාන්. Pang is pang, right? Bread is bread. But the price you have to pay is different depending on the time, right? අද ගන්නවද අනාගතයේද ගන්නවද ඉතිහාසෙදි ගත්තද කියන එක අනුව the value of that, the perceived value of that would be different, right? The cash outflow. So the present value concept is purely or mostly determined by the inflation factor. Therefore, you need to know, 5 years from now, if you are supposed to receive a amount, how much is it worth as of today, right? So this is the simple concept, right? So guys, when I'm explaining this, if if it feels like Greek, then make a workout karna vidhiya. If you cannot remember at all, no memory, you feel blank, then you have to take a note. Okay, present value of future cash flows is something I will have to study, revise it for the exam, right? But when I'm saying this, you are able to follow it, right? You understand the context, you remember the questions that you have done so far. Then no need to bother much, right? Because you already know this stuff, right? So just chuck it away. Focus on the stuff you can't remember. Okay. So your study plan should be custom for you, right? I cannot say that you have to study this, you are weak in this. That is your own assessment. Okay. Right. So that is regarding the present values, right? Then simply you will have the next area that would be simple and compound interest formulas, right? So what was this? Simple and compound interest formulas, you might remember. So you have something called simple interest. Okay. Then you will have something called compound interest. Okay. So there are two different types of interest, right? So here, simple interest, right? I equals X N R, right? This is the simple interest formula. Compound interest S equals X into 1 plus the R rate to the power 8, right? Can you remember these formulas, right? So compound interest, the maturity value, then this is the simple interest formula, right? Can you remember these concepts? Right? So simply put, if I give you an example, you invest, let's say 200,000 for a period of 1 year at a rate of, let's say, 8%, right? How much should your interest be? This would be I equals XNR. So X is 200,000, the invested amount, right? Then multiplied by N is number of years, that is 1, to the rate of 8%. You are getting an answer of 16,000. Can you remember this stuff, right? I hope so, because exam is right around the corner, right? Uh, but if you cannot remember this stuff, please go back and check it out, right? These are very, these exact stuff are being tested in the exam, right? So make sure whatever your study efforts are revolving around these four areas, right? And if you are good with this stuff, you can get up to how many marks? 14 marks. That's a lot of marks, guys, right? This is 1/3 of your pass mark, right? So මේ හතර බලාගෙන ගියත් ඔයාලට එක්සෑම් එකේ පාස් මාර්ක් වලින් 1/3 එකේ තුනෙන් එකක් විතර ස්කෝර් කරගන්නත් පුළුවන්, right? Depending on the paper, right? So don't skip any of this stuff. Okay, right. Moving on to financial operative measures for businesses, right? So as you can see, it feels like a copy paste. If you look at this table, question 3, 10 marks, question 3, 10 marks, question 3, 10 marks, right? In the recorded human history, this is always tested in question 3, and for how many marks? 10 marks, right? So even if you, in your paper, that would be July 2025, right? Where will this be tested? In question 3, for how many marks? 10 marks. Okay, you understood the pattern now. Okay. So what are the stuff they test here, right? Here also, this is a very vast syllabus. If you remember what we studied here, we have these stuff. Those are the total functions: total revenue, total cost function, total profit function, right? Then we studied something called average revenue, average cost, then average profit. Then we studied marginal revenue, marginal cost, marginal profit, right? Then we studied the break-even point, right? Then profit maximization, then differential calculus, right? Calculus. Then we studied cost minimization, right? Then we have studied something called demand function, right? We studied a lot of stuff, right? So out of all these things, right, examiner is always keen about only these stuff: total functions, marginal functions, profit maximization, and the break-even point. Not to worry, we are going to develop all these formulas based on an example question today, right? So make sure you know these stuff. You have done your prep for these areas. You can easily score 10 marks. This is like a sure shot, right? As you can see, it's always question 3, 10 marks. Then ආගේ paper එකෙත් එතකොට question 3 එකේ අහනවා මොනවද? Total revenue, total cost, total profit functions, and it can ask anything from either break even point or profit maximization point. That's all what they can ask, right? Not to worry. So we will do a question, then you can recollect your memory regarding this. Okay. Then next area is data representation and descriptive measures. So here, Puta, you have to study two types of calculations, right? This mean, median, and mode. This and standard deviation, coefficient of variation. Okay, these things, right? So, Puda, remember, these calculations can be broadly classified into two. One is measures of central tendency, and the other type of calculation would be measures of what? Measures of dispersion, right? Again, data set එක මැද center එක ගැන compute කරන statistics or measures තමයි mean, median, and mode කියන්නේ. මේ තුනෙන්ම පුතා ඔයාට අදහසක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. You can get an idea about the center point of a data set. That's why we call it as the measures of central tendency. Okay. Then measures of dispersion. Dispersion කියන්නේ පැතිරීම. විසිරීමනේ dispersion කියන වචනේ තේරුම, right? So dispersion means how it gets spread across your data set, right? So under measures of dispersion, you are supposed to know how to compute two things. That is standard deviation, okay, and coefficient of variation, right? So there's something called variance as well, which is not tested as much, but there is something called variance as well. Okay. So these things you are supposed to compute for group frequency distributions, ungroup frequency distributions, right? You might remember all these calculations, right? So the formulas as to how to compute these, right? And how to interpret this. What exactly does it mean, right? So those things you should have studied by now, right? So make sure you know these computations clearly for group frequency distributions and ungroup frequency distributions, right? And be comfortable with these calculations, right? So if you know these and pie chart pretty much, right? You can score up to 14 marks. That's a lot of marks, guys, again, okay? So here also, Puta, when I talk about these things, maybe mean you can remember. Sorry. Let me clear the slide. Okay. Maybe mean I'm okay. Then standard deviation also, maybe you are okay, right? Assume you cannot remember the rest of it. Mode කියන එක මතක ගන්න. Median and coefficient of variation, right? So in your study plan leading up to the exam, so these are the things you have to study: mode, median, and coefficient of variation. ඔය තුන බලාගත්තා නම් හරි. Okay, right. So 14 marks. There's a good lot of marks you can score from this area, right? These are things that always check. Okay. Right. Next, comparing to quantitative variables. This is also something very static, like the sun rising from east. It's a constant thing, right? It always happens. Similarly, Buddha, comparing to quantitative variables, exam they only ask one question, right? That is in question number 4. For how many marks? 10 marks, always. And what do they test? Least square regression line, right? Least square regression line එක develop කරන්න ඉගෙන ගන්න ඕන. And they will always test it. There's no question about whether we test it or not. They will always test it, right? So even in your paper, you will find this question, right? And today also, I'm going to do one question with you guys, right? So you can recollect how we are supposed to do this calculation, right? So once you do this least-square regression line thing, right? When you compute it, you're supposed to do a forecast based on that. That also we will refresh our memory as to how you can do it, right? So these are also the very standard questions, right? So if you know how to do one, you can apply it for all other questions, right? You need to just get the concept right. Okay, 10 marks, guaranteed. Okay. Then probability and its applications, right? This one, Buddha, is a bit of a tricky question because the reason why I'm saying this is in any of the examiner's reports, right? You exam make uh, examiner, right? The guys who prepare the papers, they have something called the exam report, right? What they do is they analyze the way the students have attempted the questions in the past, right? So for some weird reason, right? Probability and its applications is an area that our guys are very weak about, right? And even you back when I was a student like you guys, right? For some reason, probability and its applications was a gray area for all of us, right? Because for some reason it doesn't click properly, right? So examiner likes to test this area, so give more marks or prominence to this area as much as they can because they know you guys tend to mess this area up, right? But nevertheless, the stuff they test under probability, no matter how wide the subject can be, are always these things, right? Laws of probability, that would be additive model and the multiplicative model, right? Then you have the expected value formula and the standard normal curve, right? So just to remind you what this is, in case you cannot remember, right? Laws of probability, Buddha, this one, right? There are only two laws, right? That would be the additive model. Then you have something called the multiplicative model, right? So for additive model, multiplicative model, you have formulas, right? Intersect. Okay. Sorry. A second. So oops. Wait. I will reshare my screen. I think it went away. Okay. We were in, yeah, flows of probability. Okay. Now, under laws of probability, okay, right. We were right here. Okay. Back to where we stopped. Okay. So, as I was saying, you have the additive law and the multiplicative law, right? So, for additive law and multiplicative law, there are formulas for this, right? Probability of A, probability of B intercept, right? So these formulas for the are given in your exam as well, right? You need to know in what scenarios you are supposed to use this, right? So additive law is tapped to a keyword, right? So there are two words and O. Okay. So simply put, assume there are two separate events. This is event A and this is event B. Okay. So if the examiner asks you to compute the probability of event A and event B happening, right? You have to go to which law? That would be the multiplicative law. Okay. If the examiner asks you the same question but with a different term, that would be probability of event A or B happening. AOB, right? AOB happening, compute that probability, you are supposed to go to the additive law, right? So now you have to make sure that in the exam, what exactly they are asking, right? Are they asking the probability of two events happening? Okay, if so, what is the what exactly are they asking? What is the conjunction term? Whether it is and or o, then you will have to apply the correct formula, right? So both these formulas will be given in your exam, right? So you will have to do some prep on this. Make a use karla computations karna video adanagan in right? So this is a key area. Okay. Then, sorry, you have the expected value, right? Expected value also has a formula, right? Expected value, you have sigma xp formula, right? So this one also you will have to make sure that you know what this is for, okay? Then the standard normal curve is Puta. You remember how we used to do normal distributions like this, right? And used to identify areas in that, right? We had all these things, right? We used to compute the probability using this graphic. So this is also something the examiner tends to test. Okay. So out of all these areas, Puta, in probability, make sure you know how to do the additive law and multiplicative law, calculate the expected value and the standard normal curve. So these are the core things that I would recommend. You can go earn up to 12 marks in your exam. Okay. Right. Lastly, this is not a focus area per se because this is barely tested, right? So second, yeah. So let me go back. Yeah. So this area is not a focus area. So don't worry much about this in your exam, the index numbering and forecasting, because in the second paper, this is barely tested. They can test it still in section 1 or section A, that is the MCQ part, right? MCQs are making, but second part, they don't get much of a prominence, right? So even if they test this in the exam, there are only two index numbers they are going to check, right? You sure, yeah, 90% sure. It would be the last year's price index or last year's quantity index, right? Which can give you up to 4 marks, right? 3, 4 marks maximum. Okay. So here also, Puta, remember, I will just give you a brief. There were different types of indexes. Simple price index, simple quantity index, simple value index. Then you have average price index, then average quantity index, then average value index, right? Then average aggregate value index. Likewise, there were so many, right? So altogether, if you followed my videos, you must have seen we have studied around 16 index numbers. Dasya kapi study karla thiyen, right? So out of these 16, I want you to make sure that no matter maybe you don't know all 16, but at least make sure you know these two. May they compute karna video or exam right? So even if they want to test this in part 2, you can earn up to 4 marks. Okay. Right. So this is how the things have been transpiring in your exam. So what you need to make sure is that your study efforts are focused on these specific areas that I have mentioned here. All right. So now the next area, this is where we are going to do some maths now, right? So we are going to discuss the target questions that are being tested that I am expecting in your exam, right? So some of these questions I have obtained from past papers, right? So maybe the numbers would be different, but they would be testing the same concept, right? The mama class age hadapu gaane samaharavita the loan value can be 500,000, whereas the exam paper it can be 1 million, right? So the numbers can be different, but the concept would be the same, right? So we will do some practice based on some target questions, right? So with that, you can refresh your memory, you can take down some notes, right? And you can focus your studies on the things that you are not very confident about. Okay, right. So the target question summary. So as you can see here, ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 questions lined up for today, right? So since the examiners love to test loan installment value, I am going to discuss a question about this today, right? Then how to do the amortization and repayment schedule, the connected question. Okay. Then we are going to do a calculus question, that is where profit maximization and the break-even point would be discussed, right? Then the next one would be deriving the least square regression line. Okay. So here with the, sorry, what I need to emphasize is that these areas that I have marked here, okay, if I uh, if I were to allocate marks, may දෙකෙන් පුතා ඔයාට test exam එකේ ලකුණු around 6 marks maybe. Profit maximization and break-even point, this will amount into 10 marks. Deriving the least square regression line, that is already 10 marks, right? So these are guaranteed marks, right, in your exam. So let's run through these questions. You can raise your questions in the chat as well if you did not understand something. If you want me to explain that question again, feel free to do so, right? So it's just a matter of understanding and learning this properly. Okay, right. So now we will go to the first question. Calculation of the loan installment amount, right? Okay. So here, Buddha, I have given a simple formula for you guys to follow, right? Maybe if you did not follow my videos, if you studied elsewhere or did a self-study for that matter, maybe you are familiar with some different formulas, right? But what I would suggest is using this formula because it's so simple, right? Way too simple, and there's a less chance that you can mess it up, right? You will end up messing it in your exam. That would be very low if you follow this particular formula, right? So again, if I repeat, this formula is used to compute the installment of a loan, right? When you know the tenor of the loan එක ගෙවන අවුරුදු ගාන සහ loan interest rate එක ඔයා දන්නවා නම්, if you know these two things, you can calculate the installment of the loan, right? So we have the installment is equal to loan divided by the cumulative discounting factor, right? Then the cumulative discounting factor is computed using this lengthy formula, right? So don't worry much. We don't need to do this math because there's a table for this, right? So there's something called the CDF table, right? So I will teach you how to use this formula and this table to arrive at the answer based on an example, right? So this question, Buddha, is from one of your past papers, right? So if you have done past papers, maybe you can recollect some of these aspects, right? But nevertheless, I will explain it to you how this should be worked out in an exam context. Okay. Judy plans to obtain a student loan of 600,000, right, from a bank to be paid in 3 years at an interest rate of at an interest rate of 10% per annum in order to complete her higher studies. She intends to settle this loan in equal annual installments. You are supposed to calculate the annual installment of the loan, right? So there are key things you need to highlight here. Then you have to highlight whatever the key facts that you need to take into account, right? Loan value is 600,000. Now, ganna loan nega 600,000, right? And she plans to pay this off. Sorry. She plans to pay this off in how many years? 3 years, right? There we go. This is the tenor of the loan, right? And what's the loan interest? Loan negative 10% per annum, right? So these are all the steps you need to know to work out the answer here, right? So now I will show you how to work out the answer. Okay. Then or mulimma karanna, you are supposed to go back to your formula, right? There we go. Installment is loan divided by cumulative discounting factor, right? So let's just write it up here. Okay. Loan installment is equal to loan divided by CDF. Okay, right. So here, how much is your loan? Your loan is how much? 600,000. Laksha hai nene. That is given in your question, right? Divided by CDF, cumulative discounting factor, right? So now, how do you compute the cumulative discounting factor? There are two approaches here. Then make a denominator එක මේ පල්ලෙහා තියෙන මේ CDF cumulative discounting factor එක compute කරන්න පුතා. You have two options, right? One is using the formula, right? Or other one is using the CDF table. Okay. So if I remind you, මේ CDF කියන එක තමයි පුතා මෙතන මේ formula එකේ explain කරලා තියෙන්නේ. This seems to be something complicated, right? 1 divided by r, 1 minus 1 divided by 1 plus r to the power n, right? So this is somewhat complicated, right? It can be done, but I wouldn't recommend it, right? So the easier way would be to go to the CDF table. Then මේ CDF table එකෙන් පුළුවන් ඔයාට ඔය answer එක නැත්තම් denominator එක හොයාගන්න, right? So if I explain how this CDF table works, right? Before that, this table will be given to you in the exam, right? So you will get a copy of a formula sheet in your exam, right? Where you will be given with this discounting factor table, cumulative discounting factor table, okay? So here, Puta, what you need to consider is these two elements. Loan එක ගෙවන්නේ අවුරුදු 3කින්. හරිනේ. Rate එක 10%, right? Considering that, if you look at this particular table now, right? The table එක දිහා බැලුවොත් this is 10%. Maybe in 10%, right? Then number of years is how much? 3 years, right? So 10 and 3, if you see the intersection point, you find this value 2.4869. You see that one, right? Your percentage or the interest rate is 10%. Your number of years is how much? Number of years is 3, right? එතකොට මේ දෙක intersect වෙන point එකේ ඔයාලට value එකක් තියෙනවා. This is your cumulative discounting factor, right? So we will write this as the denominator in our function, right? So that is 2.4869. Okay. So මම මෙතන එතකොට ලියනවා, right? I will take the pen. Okay. 2.4869. That is your cumulative discounting factor, right? Okay. So what's the answer you get? So for this, you will have to use your scientific calc, right? 600,000 divided by 2.4869. Okay. How much do you get? 241,264.22, right? So here, Buddha, one of the most frequent questions that I get by students is that, so මෙතන මේ decimals කීයක් තියන්න ඕනද? How many decimals should be there in your answer, right? There's no standard norm. Huh? You can, in the exam context, ඔයාගේ answer එක මෙහෙම ලියුවොත් 241,264 කියලා තිබ්බ. This is also correct. Okay, 241,264.1. Sorry, 2. That is also correct. This answer is also correct, right? All this is correct, right? So there's no norm as to how many decimal places should be there. But a rule of thumb, the way I used to do it is just put it as 2 decimal places, right? So this is your answer, 241,264, right? So I hope this is clear, right? This should be very easy to compute, right? So if you work this out, you will get 3 marks right away, right? Then, okay. The next question is amortization and the repayment schedule. So calculating the installment කියන question එක පුතා, it amortization schedule or the question that we are just about to do right now, question 2, are somewhat interrelated, right? Once you compute the installment only, you can prepare your amortization schedule, right? So what on earth is this amortization schedule? මොකක්ද මේකේ තේරුම? What does it mean, right? An amortization schedule is a table which shows how a loan is getting repaid throughout its tenure. මොනවද සිංහලෙන් explain කරොත් amortization schedule එකක් කියලා කියන්නේ table එකක්, right? That's a table වගුවක් which shows the way a loan is getting repaid. loan එකක් ගත්ත ණයක් ගෙවාගෙන යන ආකාරය පෙන්눔 කරන වගුවක්. It's a table which shows how a loan is getting settled or getting repaid across this tenure. tenure කියන්නේ loan එක ගත්ත කාල සීමාව, right? So in this question, Puta, if you were to prepare this table, the amortization schedule, first and foremost, you need to know the structure of this table. Of course, for the convenience, for my convenience, I have put this table right here. But in your exam, they are not going to give you a table like this. එහෙම table එකක් වාට දෙන්නේ නැහැ, right? So you need to know the headers. දැන් මේකේ තියෙන columns ගාන, ඒ columns වල headers මොනවාද, that you need to remember, right? So if you don't remember now, you can refresh your memory, right? So for amortization schedule, there are supposed to be six columns. Here, loan value at the start, right? Then you have the interest, installment, capital repayment, and the loan value at the end, right? So these are the 6 columns you need to know about, right? So once you structure this, now you know there are 6 columns, right? So even in your exam, if the examiner asks you to prepare an amortization schedule, how many columns should be there? 6 columns, always, right? And the titles of these columns you need to remember. Here, loan value at the start, interest, installment, capital repayment, and the loan value at the end. Clear, right? Now the next question is, okay, you know what the columns are now, right? How many rows should be there? මේකේ තියෙන්න rows ගාන කීයක්ද පල්ලෙහාට? rows කීයක් එන්න ඕනද? Right? Remember, the number of rows would be driven by this particular piece of information. දැන් මේක ගෙවන්නේ පුතා අවුරුදු 3කින්නේ. You are trying to pay this off in 3 years, right? In equal annual installments. අවුරුද්දට එක ගානේ අවුරුදු 3ක් පුරාණ මේක ගෙවන්න හදන්නේ. What that means is, here there has to be always 3 plus 1. 3 plus 1, right? 3 is the number of installments that the examiner tells you, right? For 3 years, number of years, right? Plus 1. තව එකක් වැඩිපුර add කරගන්න, right? That is to represent either the total or your loan value at the beginning of the period, right? So either way, අර ගිහිලා තියෙන අවුරුදු ගානට වඩා එකක් වැඩිපුර add වෙන විදිහට you can draw the table. So in this case, minimum there has to be 4 rows, right? In my case, I have put 5 just so that I can explain things better. Okay, clear? Right. So now I think you have structured this in your notes, right? I hope you are following me. Okay. So I will show you how to work this out. Okay. Now, in this particular question, the number of years, on the among years, take a mark කරගෙන යනවා, right? Year 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Why only up until 3? Because this loan is getting repaid in 3 years, right? Makes sense. Okay. අවුරුදු 3ක් මන් දාගත්තා, right? What on earth is year 0, right? If you don't know what year 0 is, just remember this means now. Year 0 කියන එකේ තේරුම අද කියන එක, right? That means now, today. Today is year 0, right? Then what is 1? 1 means 1 year from now. අදින් අවුරුද්දකට පස්සේ, right? 2 means 2 years from now. 3 is 3 years from now. Okay? So now you have structured the number of years, right? Okay. Now the loan value at the start. How much is your loan? It would be 600,000. ලක්ෂයක් loan එකනේ. That is literally given to you here. Okay. So the loan value at the start is 600,000. There we go. Okay. So how much is my interest for the 10%, right? That is given in your question as well. Interest rate of 10% per annum. Okay. So this interest rate would be 10%, right? But are you going to pay any interest today? Then other loan එක ගත්තොත්, if you got this loan today, are you going to pay any interest right away? Loan එක ගත්ත ගාම pay කරන්න පටන් ගන්න නෑ නේ. You literally just got out of the bank. It is now, right? අදවා interest එකක් pay කරන්නෙත් නෑ. Installment එකක් ගෙවන්නෙත් නෑ. ගත්ත ගාම installment එක ගෙවන්නේ නෑ නේ. Capital repayment කියලා එකකුත් නෑ. So at the end of the day, අද දවස අවසාන වෙද්දී, by the time you reach the day end, right, your loan value would be 600,000. Clear? Makes sense? This line is referring to today, right? So if you got a loan today, you are not going to make any payments or no interest would be accumulated. Your loan value, 600,000 ගත්ත එක හැමෝම තියෙනවා. Okay. Now coming to this line, that is year 1. Year 1 එක පටන් ගත්තී පුතා ඔයාගේ loan value එක ආයෙත් 600,000 තමයි, right? At the start of the year, 600,000 is the value of your loan, right? Sorry. Okay. Then how much is your interest? 10% of this, right? So 600,000 කියන එක multiply කරන්න ඕන පුතා 10% වලින්. ඔයා ලක්ෂ 6ක් නෑ. ඒකට 110ක් පොලිය හැදෙන්න ඕනනේ. Interest එක. Okay. 600,000 into 10%. You don't need calculators for this, of course, right? 60,000. How much is your installment? My installment කියන එක compute කරා පුතා. This is your installment. There we go, right? 241,264, right? I'm going to disregard the decimals, right? 241,000, 264, 264, right? 264, right? That is your installment, right? Putha, what is this capital repayment? Remember, capital repayment refers to the amount that is getting deducted from your loan, right? Then in this scenario, in this particular loan, right? Your loan is 600,000. The bank will charge you 60,000 rupees interest. Against that, you are paying how much? Back to the bank, how much is your installment? You are paying 241,264 rupees as your installment, right? So how much is getting actually deducted from your loan? That would be the difference between your installment and the interest, right? If I put it in other words, installment interest A කියලා හිතන්නකෝ. Assume this column is A, installment is B කියලා හිතුවොත්, right? Then capital repayment would be B minus A. All right? So if I repeat, right? If your interest is A, if your installment is B, capital repayment would be B minus A, right? So B minus A, mega minus mega. So how much is it? 241,624 minus 60,000, right? You are getting 181,624, right? So ඔයාගේ loan එකකින් එතකොට ඇත්තටම අඩු වෙන්නේ 181,624. Okay? So from 600,000 you have to deduct this to get the loan value at the end. මේ අන්තිම column එක fill කරන්න නම් from the starting value of your loan you have to deduct this capital repayment, that is 181,000, right? So 600,000, right, minus your answer, you are getting 76, right? Okay. So this amount I am going to write here, 418,376. Then එතකොට පළවෙනි අවුරුද්ද අවසාන වෙද්දී අපේ loan balance එක 481,000. Sorry, 418,000. That becomes the loan value at the start of year 2. Your interest would be 10% of this. මේකෙන් 110ක් තමයි දැන් ගන්නවා. This multiplied by 10%, of course, would give you 41,837.6. So I will say, take it as 838, Okay. Yeah. So your installment remains the same. Installment එක වෙනස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. 241,264, right? Then your capital repayment would be 241,264 minus your answer. You are getting 199,426, right? Okay. 418,376 minus your answer would be 218,904 950, let's say. Yeah, 950. Okay. Then that comes here, 218,950. Then 218,950, right? Multiplied by 10%, again 21,895, right? Then your installment would be 241,264, right? And your capital repayment would be the difference between 241,000 and 21,000, right? 241,264 minus your answer, you are getting 219,369, right? Then your final answer would be 218,950 minus answer. There's around a $400 difference, right? 419. This is negative. Okay. This can be rounded off, right? Koti ganak ituru වෙනවා because of the use of decimals. We are rounding things off, right? අපි round off කරන නිසා පුතා, because of that, some of these numbers would be there would be a plus or minus, right? So if you take the decimals perfectly, then this answer would be zero. මෙතන අන්තිමට එන්න ඕන answer එක zero, right? In this case, it doesn't happen because, of course, we rounded things off a lot, right? For example, cumulative discounting factor එක ගත්තත් අපි round off කරා මෙතන, right? Then මෙතන මේ අපි installment එක ගත්තත් මේ 0.22 කෑල්ල ඒක අපි අයින් කරානේ, we disregarded that, right? So that is also gone. And along this computation also, we are taking some decimals out. So therefore, there would be a small variance, but it won't be a lot. So in your exam paper also, when you are writing this up, you can round this off to zero and keep it. So ultimately, what should happen is, in your repayment schedule, your final answer should be zero, ultimately. If you work it out correctly, it should be zero, right? That being said, පුතා මෙතන මේ ලක්ෂ 6ක loan එකක variance එක 400 rupees වගේ වාට එන්න, right? This cannot be in like 10,000, no? That means something is drastically wrong, right? So there can be a variance here because of the rounding off, but that cannot be extensive variance, right? $100, $200, depending on the size of the loan, right? In this case, it's not material, right? But if your answer is off by a mile, then that's a problem. You will have to revisit your math and see. Okay. Right. So, okay. So now I will just want to see. Wait, one second. You just have a look at your chat. Okay. There's some messages. Okay. 181,600 Okay. Seems to be a typo. Let me see. There was a question here. Sorry. I mean, a note here from one of the students, 241,264 minus 60,000. Yeah. Okay. So that explains this smaller variance. Here, Buddha, because there was a small error. This has to be 264. I wrote it wrong as 624. It has to be 264, right? So some numbers would be different. This here the variance, there you will end up with a smaller variance regardless, right? But it would be more or less attributable to the rounding off error. Okay, clear. So remember, guys, in the exam also, when you are doing this calculation, one thing you will have to remember is that here the installment value remains constant. Make a වෙනස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. That remains the same, right? And your interest values are supposed to go down as the loans are getting repaid, right? And the capital repayment values are supposed to go up, right? So installment remains the same, interest goes down, and your capital repayment, the amount that gets deducted from your loan, goes up. Okay, right. So this is the answer or the depiction of how the amortization schedule would work, right? So, okay. So hope that is clear. If there are any doubts, you can raise them in the chat. Okay. And we will go to the next question, right? So here, Buddha, I want to explain something called differential calculus, right? How to convert a total revenue function to marginal revenue, total cost function to marginal cost, and total profit functions to marginal profit. Okay. So if you remember your notes, right, when you are computing the profit maximization and the cost minimization, right, the profit maximization was explained as MR equals MC or MP equals 0. The cost minimization was explained as MC equals 0, right? So මේ දෙකෙන් පුතා exam එකේදී ගොඩක් ඒගොල්ලෝ ටෙස්ට් කරන්නේ මෙන්න මේක. MR equals 0, sorry, MR equals MC and MP equals 0 කියන concept එක. Right? This is what is being tested for the most part in the exam, right? Cost minimization, there was one exam paper they have tested it, but it's not as famous, right? The examiner likes to test the profit maximization, right? So what we are going to do is we want to understand this concept and we are going to work out a calculation for this, right? So this is also from the past paper, right? And how the profit maximization is tested, I'm going to work it out alongside with you guys, right? So you can follow me now. Okay. Now, let's read the question first. Okay. A product's demand function for a month is P equals 23 minus 4Q. Demand function කියලා එකක් දීලා තියෙනවා. Okay. Then it says it has a fixed cost of 15,000 rupees. රුපියල් 15,000 කියලා තියෙනවා fixed cost එක, right? And the variable cost is Q squared plus 3Q per month. Okay. So this is all what they have given you as the as information in this question, right? And it says Q is the number of units produced during the month in thousands. දහස් වලින් තමයි මේක දීලා තියෙන්නේ, right? Okay. So you are required to identify the total revenue and the total cost function, identify the profit function, and also identify the number of units at which the profit is maximized. So altogether 10 marks, right? So this is more or less the same way the examiner typically tests this area, right? So we will attempt this question now. Okay. So Buddha, first and foremost, you need to understand what the examiner wants you to do, right? What are the things you need to compute? Total revenue function is 1. Total cost function is 2, right? Then in B section, he wants to identify the profit function, right? Profit function එක පුතා කියලා නැති වුණාට ඔයා දැනගෙන ඉන්නවා. Profit function එක denote කරන්නේ TP වලින්, right? So in simple, you're supposed to compute TR, TC, and TP, the 3 total functions, right? And based on those, you're supposed to compute profit maximization, right? At which point the profit gets maximized, right? Sure. Let's recollect and refresh our memory how to work out a question like this. Okay. So here, Buddha, I'm going to work out the total functions, right? So TR, TC, and TP. What are these? එතන මේ A and B එකේ අහලා තියෙන functions වලට උත්තරේ නේද මේ මම හදන්න ආද, right? TR, TC, and TP. These are the things that we are going to compute, right? Okay. So Buddha, remember, for each of these functions, there's a standard function. This function won't be given to you in the exam. You should remember this, right? TR stands for what? The total revenue, right? Total revenue කියන එක ඔයා class එකේ compute කරේ price into quantity කියන formula එකෙන්. P multiplied by Q. Okay, right. Total cost. How did you compute the total cost in the class? That would be variable cost plus fixed cost. This is your formula for that. Okay. Total profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost, right? So මේ question එක tackle කරන්නවා මුලින්ම දැනගෙන ඉන්න ඕන දේවල් ටික තමයි මේ, right? You should know this standard function, right? So this is half of the works done, right? ඔයා මේ function එක දන්නවනම් you are halfway through. Okay. Now I am going to work this out based on the information that is given in your question, right? So TR is equal to price into quantity, right? So මෙතන පුතා price කියන එක ඔයාට දීලා නැහැ fixed amount එකක් විදිහට, right? So if I ask a question about, let's say, what's the price of this phone? මේ phone එකේ price එක කීයද කියලා, you might tell me, sir, this phone is, let's say, 100,000 rupees, right? But if I ask this question, you are not going to tell it to me as a formula, right? The value of this phone or the price of this phone is equal to 23 minus 4Q. If we are used to referring to price as a fixed amount, right? That's what we usually do, right? But in the exam, they have given you the price, but as a formula, not as a fixed amount. This is this function. They call this the demand function. They can call this a price function, whatever said and done. This is P equals something, right? It literally means price, right? So price එක fix එකක් amount එකක් විදිහට දෙනවා වෙනුවට they have denoted this as a formula. Makes sense, right? Okay. So instead of price, I am going to write the formula, that is 23 minus 4Q. 23 minus 4Q. Okay. Now this gets multiplied by Q, right? Remember, this bracket is very important, right? මේ bracket එක නොදාවා ගාන හැදුවොත් your answer would be incorrect. Okay? I will show you what happens if you don't use the brackets later, but first I will work this out for you, right? So now TR is equal to what? 23 multiplied by Q would be 23Q, right? Minus 4Q to the power 2, 4Q square, right? This would be your answer. හරිනේ. Bracket එක අයින් කරද්දී when you are removing the brackets, you are multiplying, right? Okay. 23 multiplied by Q is 23Q. 4Q multiplied by Q would be 4Q to the power 2, 4Q squared, right? If you don't use this bracket, this is a very common mistake, a simple mistake that can happen to you in the exam. Make a bracket එක නොදා හැදුවොත් ඔයා කොහමද හදන්නේ? TR equals 23 minus 4Q into Q. කොහොමනේ bracket එක නොදා ලිව්වොත් ලියන්නේ? Then your TR answer is what? 23 minus 4Q square. Because this multiplied by Q will only be applicable to the latter part of the price function. 4Q කියන එකට විතරනේ ඔක එතකොට අදාළ වෙන්නේ නේ. So please remember, when you are multiplying price by quantity, use the bracket for the price and then multiply it by the quantity. Clear? Okay. So I will remove this incorrect part. වැරදි එක නේද? Right. හරි එක තමයි ඔය උඩ තියෙන්නේ. Okay? Right. So similarly, we are going to work out the cost function now. දැන් ඔය ගානේ මහනවනේ cost එක කීයද කියලා, total cost function එක. That is this, right? So total cost පුතා, in the class you have studied this as variable cost plus fixed cost. Variable cost එක වාට දීලා දිනවා function එකක් විදියට, that is Q squared plus 3Q, right? Q squared plus 3Q, right? Then what is your fixed cost? Fixed cost is 15,000 rupees per month, right? Okay. This is 15,000. All right. Cool. So that's literally it. There's nothing more to simplify here. VC කියන එකයි FC කියන එකයි, if you connect the variable and the fixed cost, you are getting your total cost. මුළු පිරිවැය එනවා. ඔයාගේ විචල්්‍ය පිරිවැය, ස්ථාවර පිරිවැය එකතු කරාම. So that is that, right? Then the total profit is the variance between these two functions, right? මේ functions දෙක අතර තියෙන වෙනස තමයි total profit කියලා කියන්නේ. Revenue කියන්නේ ආදායම, cost කියන්නේ වියදමනේ. ආදායමෙන් වියදම අඩු කරාම ආට profit එක එනවා, ලාභය එනවා, right? So the same concept applies here. So TP is equal to TR. TR කියන එක ඔයා මෙතන දැන් compute කරලා තියෙන්නේ. This one. මේ තියෙන්නේ TR, TC මෙතන තියෙනවා. So you have to deduct this, right? Okay, let's do that now. 23Q minus 4Q squared making අඩු කරන්න ඕන, right? Q squared plus 3Q plus 15,000, right? So this is the function, right? So if I simplify this now, මෙතන තියෙනවා පුතා positive 23Q, right? ඒකෙන් අඩු කරන්න ඕන because see this entire total cost has to be removed, right? මේ සම්පූර්ණ එකම අයින් කරන්න ඕනනේ. So therefore this negative mark gets applied for this 3Q as well. So 23න් 3ක් අඩු වෙන්නයි ඕන. Even though this is positive 3Q, since there's a bracket and a negative mark or a deduction preceding that, this becomes minus 3Q, negative 3Q, right? So then this becomes what? 20Q. Okay. Then negative 4Q squared, negative Q squared. Negative Q squared කියන එක පුතා, right? Even though we write it like this is actually what? Negative 1Q squared. අපි 1 එක ලියන්නේ නැහැ. හැබැයි 1 එක එතන තියෙනවා නේ. So negative Q squared, negative 1Q squared, right? So you are ending up with negative 5Q squared, negative and negative, you add them, right? Then this, what happens to this 15,000? Palos දාට මොකද වෙන්නේ? Fixed cost එකට. Becomes negative, right? Because there's a negative mark preceding that bracket, right? Minus 15,000. Okay. So these are your answers. TR is 23Q minus 4Q squared. TC is Q squared plus 3Q plus 15,000. Total profit is 20Q minus 5Q squared minus 15,000. Right? So this TP Puta, you can, show it in a more nice manner or more organized manner by bringing this squared section to the beginning, right? That would be negative 5Q squared plus 20Q minus 15,000. මෙහෙම ලිව්වොත් මේක ලස්සනයි because the squared function එක standard format එකක් තියෙනවා. There's a standard format, right? What is that? So you must have seen this. Plus bx plus c, right? So සාමාන්‍ය අපි squared term එක ඉස්සරහින් තියන්න, right? There's nothing wrong. Even if you write it like this, there's nothing wrong. But it would be more advisable to keep it in a standard form. That's where your squared function comes to the front, then the next section followed up by the fixed amount, right? So that is how it should be. Okay, right. So now this is done. එතකොට දැන් අපි මේ section එකයි මේ section එකයි දෙකම කරලා ඉවරයි. Now comes the tricky part, the profit maximization. පළවෙනි දෙක anyone can do, right? It's pretty easy, right? 7 marks still. එක ලකුණු 7ක්. It wouldn't take even 5 minutes for you to do, right? So the next part is profit maximization. Now Buddha, for profit maximization, as I was telling you previously, there are two ways of doing this. MR equals MC and MP equals 0. ඔය condition දෙකෙන්ම එන්නේ එකම answer එක. Okay? So whatever the path you choose, you are ending up with the same answer, right? Does that mean that in the exam you are supposed to work it out in both the ways? මේ ක්‍රම දෙකෙන්ම හදන්න ඕනද? No, you don't have to do it in both the ways. You have to just choose one way of doing it and arrive at the answer. That's it, right? So for the purpose of demonstration, since I want to teach you guys both these methods, I am going to do it in both the ways. But please remember, in the exam, the expectation is for you to not work it out in both the ways. Use one of the ways to come to the answer. That's it, right? Okay, so now profit maximization. We will start off with the first way of doing it, right? That would be, right, MR equals MC. Now, මේ පැත්තේ හදනවා MR equals MC method එකට. On the right hand side, I am going to work it out using MP equals 0 method. Okay, right. So now, first I need to compute MR and MC. පළවෙනි විදියට ඕක හදනවා නම් I need to compute marginal revenue and marginal cost. Those are the two components in this formula, right? You need to have the marginal revenue and the marginal cost, right? So to compute that, Pudha, how do we compute this? That is the main question, right? If you look at here, this flow I have given here, ඔයාගේ total revenue එක differentiate කරොත්, you are ending up with something called the marginal revenue. Okay? ඔයාගේ total cost එක differentiate කරොත්, you are getting the marginal cost. Okay? So we know these stuff. Then TR and TC කියන එක හදන්නවනේ, you already computed this previously. Total revenue and cost හදුවානේ. Now what you are supposed to do is you are supposed to differentiate them and arrive at marginal revenue and the marginal cost. Makes sense, right? So you know what needs to be done, right? But the question is, what is this differentiation? What is this term, right? Differentiation is a technique that we use to identify a slope of the function, right? Or the gradient of a function, right? I know it's not in our system, right? Because we are commerce guys, right? I'm an accountant, you guys are also aspiring to be accountants in the future. Maths is not in our system, right? So something like differentiation is not something you learn in your O levels, right? Or any maths that you have learned, unless you have done some A-level maths or university level maths, right? Differential calculus is not something you learn at these smaller levels, right? But unfortunately or fortunately, we have to learn it, right? So what I'm going to do now is I will show you how differentiation is used to convert these total functions to the marginal function, right? Let me work it out for you, right? Now follow me carefully. If you don't understand this, right, you will have to go back to your notes and the videos, okay? Because this is like an 8-hour lesson. I'm trying to show how it is done, right? But exactly how the dynamics as the small clicks and balances, how it is worked out. If you can't remember this at all, please go back, right? This is a sure and short exam question, okay? Right. I'm starting off with the TR function, right? TR is 23Q minus 4Q. Okay, now answer 23Q minus 4Q square, right? What is that? This answer, right? Okay. Now I'm going to differentiate this. Now follow me. Okay. DTR divided by DQ. Okay. What on earth did I just write? DTR means differentiation of the total revenue. What we are trying to differentiate is total revenue. No? So we are going to differentiate that. Okay. To the base of Q. In this function, the unknown term is Q, right? Q ne me patte තියෙන නොදන්නා පදේ. So therefore, we are using the Q as the differentiation base. Okay. Stay with me, right? So I'm going to use a function like this. I'm මෙතන ලියන්නම් a function එක somewhere around here. Okay. Wait. Yeah, somewhere here. There's a standard formula you need to know here. That is the one I'm just about to write. Differentiation of ax to the power n would be nax to the power n minus 1. Okay, this is the formula you need to remember. Okay. AXN කියන එක differentiate කරොත් you are getting NAX to the power n minus 1. Okay. Now let's apply them. Watch, right? Power එක ඉස්සරහට එන්න ඕන multiplication එකක් විදියට. You see here, right? Okay. The power here is 1 multiplied by 23Q. Okay. Then what happens? AX කියන එක හැමෝම අපි ලිව්වා. 23Q කියන එක හැමෝම ලිව්වා. n ට පස්සේ. You see? n කියන එක ඉස්සරහට ගත්තා. AX කියන එක අපි හැමෝම ලියනවා. That in this case it's 23Q, right? Then මේ තියෙන n කියන power එකට මොකද වෙන්නේ? That becomes n minus 1. Okay? So තියෙන බලය එකයි. The power that already is written here is 1. So you are supposed to deduct 1 from that. Okay? Then the same thing can be applied for the second part. Then ඊළඟට තියෙනවා negative 4q squared කියලා එකක්. Okay. Power comes in front as a multiplication. In this case, it is 2. 4q I am writing as it is. Power is 2. You have to take out 1 from that. Okay. What I just did, if it sounds like Greek to you, if it sounds like Tamil to you, no offense to Tamil, it's just because that it's something you can't understand, right? So if this is Greek, like Greek, please, ladies and gentlemen, forget everything about other studies and everything, other syllabus topics in maths. You will have to figure this out, right? This is a must know, okay? Right. So MR, your final answer, right, would be 23Q minus 8Q, okay? How does this happen? 1 into 23Q is to the 23Q. 1 minus 1 is to the power 0, right? To the power 0, it means the same thing. If I tell you this, 5 to the power 0, 10 to the power 0, 100 to the power 0. What's the answer for all these? Answer for all these is what? Answer to all this is 1. Okay, right. Then 5 to the power 1, 10 to the power 1, 100 to the power 1. What does this mean? It means the same number, right? In this case, it is 5. In this case, it is 10. In this case, this is 100, right? ඕනම සංඛ්‍යාවක පළවෙනි බලය කියලා කියන්නේ එම සංඛ්‍යාවමයි. The power 1 of any number is equal to that exact same number, right? The power 0 of any number refers to 1, okay? So please remember that. So here, එතකොට මේක 23 to the power 1 කියන එකේ පුතා q to the power 0 කියලා කියන්නේ it makes it just 23, right? මොකද q to the power 0 කියලා කියන්නේත් එතකොට මොකක්ද? q to the power 0 කියලා කියන්නේත් 1 නේ. 23 multiplied by 1 කියලා කියන්නේ it's 23 still, right? Minus 8q as it is, right? From the 8q and 2 multiplied by 4 is 8. Q to the power 2 minus 1 can q to the power 1. Q to the power 1 can you don't have to write that 1. It's 8q, right? Because to the power 1 of any number is the same number, right? Again, q to the power 1 can q ma. You don't have to write that 1. Okay. I know it can get complicated, but this is how it is, right? So I hope you guys could refresh or recollect your memory. If not so, please, you will have to go back and study this section. Okay. Right. So we are done with MR. Now MC, the same logic, right? MR can compute kara. Now MC compute karan, you have to start with a second. We have to first write TC. How much is your TC? Total cost q squared plus 3q plus 15,000, right? Q squared plus 3q plus 15,000. Okay. So DTC divided by DQ, differentiation of total cost. So the differentiation here would be 2 multiplied by 1q, 2 minus 1, plus 1 multiplied by 3q, 1 minus 1, plus the differentiation result of a fixed number would be 0. Okay. Now, your answer here would be how much? This would be 2q, right? If you simplify it, plus 3. 2q plus 3, that's it, right? Okay. So now, the final answer here is Puta, in your differentiation answer, how much would it be? MR equals MC profit maximization, right? So your MR is 23 minus 8q. MC is 2Q plus 3, right? Then I can shift this negative 8Q this way. This becomes 10Q. This becomes 20, right? 23 minus 3. This positive 3, when it goes to the other side, away from the equal sign, right? It becomes negative 23 minus 3. This negative 8Q, when it goes to the other side, it becomes positive, right? So Q equals how much? 2, right? So this Q equals 2 කියන එක පුතා, this is not the final answer. Remember, Q is the number of units produced during the month in thousands. මේක දහස් වලින් දීලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට Q equals 2 නෙමෙයි. Units කීයක් produce කරනවා profit maximize වෙන්නේ. That has to be 2000, right? Q equals 2 කියන්නේ 2000 units. Okay, this has to be your final answer, right? So keep in mind these small information that is given in your question, right? That make the difference between a guy who just passes and a prize winner, right? So these details are important if you want to earn the full marks, right? So for example, මේ ගානේ පුතා ඔයා මෙතන answer එක 2 කියලා තිබ්බ. The examiner might give you maybe how many marks? Maybe 2 marks for your effort, right? You are supposed to get 3 marks in total for this answer, right? Calculation of the profit maximization point should give you 3 marks, right? If you get the answer or keep the answer at 2000 units, maybe the examiner will give you the full marks, right? Whereas you ended it at Q equals 2, maybe he will give you maybe 2 marks, 1 mark, depends on how generous the paper marking gentleman would be, right? So why leave it out for speculation, right? Don't take any chances, right? So read the question properly and keep the correct answer in the number of units or the denominations as it should, okay? So as I said, Pudha, this is one way of arriving at your answer. There's another way, right? MP equals 0. So I will quickly work it out as well, just so that you know how it works, right? So total profit function again tamawa patan ganna on. Because why? Because to get to the marginal profit, you are supposed to differentiate the total profit function. Make a differentiate kanna. So you have the total profit function already computed. That is negative 5Q square plus 20Q minus 15,000. Negative 5Q squared plus 20Q plus, sorry, minus 15,000. Make a difference because it gets eliminated. I will show it to you, right? Yeah, negative 15,000. Now I'm going to differentiate this DTP, differentiation based on Q, negative, sorry, what exactly happened? Okay. All right, okay. Negative 2 multiplied by 5Q, 2 minus 1, plus 1 into 20Q, 1 minus 1, differentiation of a constant is 0, right? Then your marginal profit would be negative 10Q, right? Plus 20. Then profit maximization එකේ දෙවනි condition එක මොකක්ද? MP equals 0. MP equals 0. What that means is this function MP or however MP has to be 0, right? That means 0 equals negative 10Q plus 20, right? Negative 10Q, when it goes to the other side, it becomes positive. So this becomes 10Q equals 20. Therefore, Q is equal to 2. Ayat, me answer ka වෙනවා. Clear, right? So in the exam, you can use either, right? මේ දෙකෙන් එකකින් ඔයා answer එක හදාගත්තොත් it's perfectly fine, right? So guys, okay, I think this one you have understood correctly, right? I hope, right? Now, the next question is about the break-even point, okay? So for the break-even point, Pudha, there are two conditions similarly. Total revenue is equal to total cost or total profit is equal to 0, right? What is break-even point? If I explain it to you in brief, that is where your business is not earning any profit, right? Where your cost is equal to revenue, right? හිතන්න මෙහෙම මම මේ ක්ලාස් එක කරන්න මගේ cost එක හිතන්න 10,000 rupees කියලා, right? And from this class, I'm earning also, let's say 10,000 rupees. That means I'm at the break even, right? මට ලාභෙකුත් නැහැ, පාඩුවකුත් නැහැ. I'm earning 10,000, I'm spending 10,000 in this business, right? So that is what we call as a break even point. So break even point is Puta, the bare minimum you have to achieve to maintain the business or continue the business in that current status, right? Break even point එක achieve කරේ නැහැ කියන්නේ පුතා, you are operating at a loss, right? That means your business is going down, okay? If you exceed your break even point, if you do more sales than your break even point, that means your business is growing, right? ඔය ලාභත් නැති පාඩුත් නැති intersection එක තමයි අපි break even point කියලා කියන්නේ. Okay, so that is what we are going to compute here. So this is also something very easy, right? So break even point, there's a question here, right? So let me work this out. Total cost function and the demand function of a firm per month is given by the following functions, right? TC is 13Q squared plus 5Q minus 10,000. Price function is 13Q minus 20, where Q is the number of units produced per month. Okay, you are required to calculate break-even point. Okay, so as I just explained to you, break-even point, there are two ways of doing it. We will take the first method. Okay, so first method එකට ඔය ගාන හදනවා නම් ඔයාට ඕන components දෙක මොනවාද? Unit two components. One is TR, other one is TC, right? TR, you know, it is price multiplied by quantity, right? Then TC is already given to you, right? That is 13Q squared plus 5Q minus 10,000. Sorry, 1,000. That is already given to you, right? So api meka hadala emu. TR is equal to, one second, yeah, price is equal to 13Q minus 20. මේකනේ price එක මේ තියෙන අර කලින් වගේම price එක demand function එක දීලා තියෙන price එක, that's the price per unit, right? That has to be multiplied by Q. So you are getting 13Q squared minus 20Q, right? So this is your TR. TR is there. TC කියන එක හදන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. They have given this to you, right? So your break-even point is Puta, TR equals TC, right? So simply put, 13Q squared minus 20Q is equal to TC. TC would be 13Q squared plus 5Q minus 1,000. Okay. Make an answer, right? So what would be your final answer? Now you have to simplify this simply, right? So when this 13Q goes to the other side, it becomes negative. So you can offset these two. Okay, make a capital, right? What remains would be 20Q. I'm going to push this way. That would make it positive. So this would be 25Q. And this negative 1,000, if I push it the other way, becomes positive 1,000, right? Q would be 1,000 divided by 25. That would be how much? 1,000 divided by 25 would be 40, right? 1,000 divided by 25, yeah, 40 units. Okay. So even if you work it out using the price function, you are supposed to get the same answer. But remember, Buddha, මෙතන දැන් price function එක use කරලා හදන එක, that's not ideal for you. Why is that? See, here you need to compute the TR function, TC function, then only you can compute the price profit function, right? So what's the easier method? Then make Gana Hadasi. What I'm trying to explain is this Buddha. Metana TR and TC කියන එක හැදුවට පස්සේනවා TP හදන්න ඕන වෙනවනේ. Then only you can use this second method because you need to know what TP is to make it equal to 0, right? So what I would suggest is in a question like this, since you have two options, use the easier method, right? Because we are trying to reach the same answer as quickly as possible, right? So this would be the recommended method for you to get the answer, right? So I hope that is also clear for you guys, right? So remember guys, in your exam, they will test either the profit maximization, මේක හරි නැත්තම් මේක හරි තමයි test කරන්න. That's it, right? Simple. 10 marks. Easy peasy. Okay. So you will get a very similar question, different numbers, but the same logic. Calculate the profit maximization, calculate the break-even point, same story. Okay. So be well prepared. These are freebies, right? No need to forecast like you like be ambiguous, make a high than. There's no question about whether these stuff will be tested or not. You saw that in my analysis, right? They will test this stuff. So just do a couple of questions, be prepared, and you can ace your exam. Okay. Right. So break-even point, we already computed that. Now deriving the least square regression line. So I know I have exceeded my time a little bit, right? So what I will do is I will send you this answer, right? How to compute the least square regression line. So for the time being, what I will do is I will explain the rationale behind this question, right? And I will send you this question as well. You can work it out on your own and you can compare it with my answer, okay? So before you attempt this question, if I explain how this works, Pudha, is that the least square regression line here, to compute this, you have these two formulas, right? So this is just to explain how it is, and this is the calculation part of it. Okay, right. The මෙතන පුතා එතකොට ඔයා මතක තියාගන්න ඕන දේ තමයි, you might remember in your earlier days or චූටි කාලේ, you might be familiar with this particular formula that I have given at the top, right? What is that? Y equals A plus BX, right? In grade 9 or grade 8, when you guys were studying, this is the formula for a straight line, right? සරල රේඛාවක මොකද්ද සමීකරණය නෙමෙයි ගන්නේ. This is a formula of a straight line, right? Similarly, in the least square regression line, this fancy word, least square regression line, whatever it means, right? The formula of that is exactly the same. Y equals A plus BX කියලා ඉගෙන ගත්ත formula එකම තමයි අපි මේ least square regression line කියලාත් ඉගෙන ගන්න. It's the exact same thing, right? The connection is that this A that you learn, this letter A that you learn when you were a junior, right? And this letter C, these two are the same, right? And this M that you have learned when you were a junior, it's the same as B, right? Or M කියලා ඉගෙන ගත්ත එකයි C කියලා ඉගෙන ගත්ත එකයි පුතා, it's the same, right? It's the same thing as B and A. It's just a rebrand, right? So what I'm trying to say is that these two formulas are the same. This is the exact same. මෙතන මම අමුතුවෙන් එක අලුත් දෙයක් ඔයා ඉගෙන ගන්නෙ නෑ. This is grade 8 maths, right? So now that you know what this is the function of a straight line, right? To compute the function of the straight line, you need two things, right? M and C. මේ දෙකනේ ඔයා compute කරේ පොඩි කාලේනේ. If I tell you y equals 5x plus 10. Make a straight line එක formula එකක් නේද මේ? This is a formula of a straight line, right? So what did we do? Then least square regression line hari, simple line එකක් hari, straight line එකක් solve කරනවා කියලා අපි මොකද කරේ? What did we do by solving this? We simply assign numbers for M and C. එතන මේ තියෙන M එකටයි C එකටයි numbers දෙකක් දාපු එකනේ අපි කරේ පොඩි කාලේ. That's all what we did, right? So this is a perfectly fine function of a straight line, right? So similarly, when you are solving the regression line, if you were to solve this so-called regression line, you need to compute two numbers. What are the two? M and C, which are rebranded as A and B. That's all what you're supposed to do, right? So to compute A and B, there's a formula. B කියන එක solve කරන්න formula එකක් තියෙනවා. A කියන එක solve කරන්නත් formula එකක් තියෙනවා. Right? So I hope you understand the logic. මෙතන මොකද්ද කරන්න යන්නේ කියන එක I hope you guys are clear on that, right? So maybe what do you think? I can work this out in 10 minutes. Let's work it out because I much rather explain how this works out than giving you just the final answer because then you will have to speculate how things work, right? So just allow me 10 more minutes, right? So I hope you guys are not sleepy, right? So I will explain this question so you guys can recalculate it on your own, right? Now, deriving the least square regression line based on this data set. Now I'm going to work it out, right? So in the exam question that they will give you this part. May highlight current section part of this particular piece of information, right? X and Y කියලා column දෙක table එකක් විතරයි වාට දෙන්නේ. That's all what you get in the exam, right? Now, based on this, to start working this out, you need two additional columns, right? You won't get a nice template like this in your exam. You have to add these two columns consciously, right? So you add these two columns and you are going to call them x squared and xy. Okay. Now the next step is you are supposed to fill these two additional columns, right? So x squared means square of this x column, right? Dekhe square, hatare square, high square. Likewise, you are supposed to get the x squared, right? 2 squared, 4. 4 squared, 16. 6 squared, 36. Then 8 squared, 64. 10 squared is 100. 12 squared would be 144, right? Okay. xy means Buddha, x multiplied by y. Even though we don't write this multiplication mark, that means multiplication, right? If you write two letters together, the connection will be a multiplication, right? So you are supposed to multiply x by y. X කියන එක y වලින් multiply කරන්නයි ඕන, right? 2 into 10. How much is it? 20. 4 into 8. That would be 32, right? 6 by 6 is 36 again. 8 by 6. That would be 40. Yeah, that would be 48, right? Okay. 10 by 7 would be 70. Then 12 by 8 would be how much? That would be 96, I believe, right? Yeah, 96. Okay. Now, Buddha, you are supposed to add all these columns now. Blue color shape, there's like a row that I have added, right? So what you need to do now is simply add all these numbers downwards. Column add right? So you would get 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8 plus 10 plus 12, right? So you are going to get 42. Then 10 plus 8 plus 6 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8. That will be 45, right? Just let me know if I have any calculation error. 4 plus 16 plus 36 plus 64 plus 100. Okay. Plus 100 plus 144. That will be 364, right? Then 20 plus 32 plus 36 plus 48 plus 70 plus 96. Okay. You are getting 302. Okay. So we are going to give these some names. This 42 is for the sigma x. This 45 would be sigma y. This 64 would be sigma x squared. And this 302 would be sigma xy, right? So let me quickly double check if the numbers are correct, right? Give me a moment, right? I will double check if my amounts are correct before I move to the next step, right? I'm going to compute these figures again, right? 8, 6, 6, 6, 7, and 8. 6, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, got it. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to see if the totals are correct. Sigma x is supposed to be 42, right? Then sigma y is supposed to be 45, correct? Sigma x squared is supposed to be 364, that is also correct. Then sigma xy is supposed to be 302, that is also correct, all right? So these numbers are double checked now. Okay. So the sigma කියන එකේ තේරුම that denotes the total, right? So total of the x column, if you look at it, the total of the x column is sigma x. Total of the y column is sigma y. Total of x squared is sigma x squared. Total of this xy column is sigma xy, right? Makes sense, right? Sigma means total. Okay. So now you can jump to your formula and you can just work out the least square regression line, right? So here we go. Now I am going to start working out the numbers. Follow me. B is equal to n. Kuda n can be number of rows, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 rows in this table, right? Then a data sets right? There are 6 rows simply. So my n is 6. Pada sankhyawa 6, right? Multiplied by sigma xy. Sigma xy කියන්නේ මේ 300 දෙකනේ. This is 302 sigma xy, right? 302 minus sigma x. Sigma x is 42, right? 42 multiplied by sigma y is 45, right? 45, then divided by 6 multiplied by sigma x squared. Sigma x squared is 364, right? 364 minus sigma x is 42, and you have to take the square of that. 42 to the power, right? So you can simplify this now, right? So let me simplify this. 6 into 302 minus 42 multiplied by 45, right? You get minus 78 numerator, and the denominator would be 6 into 364, right? Minus 42 to the power 2, 420, right? You are getting 72 divided by 420, you are getting minus 0.171 something. Okay. Just keeping it at 3 decimal places. Let me see if that number is correct, right? Yeah. So we double check. 0.18, yeah, negative 0.1817. Okay, let me double check. 6 into 302 minus 42 into 45, right? 42 into 45, right? Okay. Okay, right. Okay. 6 into 364, right? 42 to the power 2. Okay. 42 to the power 2, right? Then 6 into 364 minus that answer. Okay, 420. Yeah. 78 divided by 420. Yeah, sorry, there is a small error here. Let me fix that. Its final answer has to be 78 divided by 420, right? Okay. We get negative 0.18 something, right? Sorry. 0.18. Okay. Let me write that again. 185 maybe. This is correct, lah. Okay. So this should be fine. Okay. Now computing A. Now B is done. We will compute A, right? Sigma Y is how much? 45 divided by N is 6. May B කියන එක පුතා you have already computed now. This is B, right? B කියන එක we computed just now, right? So negative B. So this is positive B. Positive B කියන එක negative 0.185. How much would be the negative B then? So you have to write it within brackets again, right? 0.185. හරිනේ. මේක then multiply වෙන්න ඕන sigma x වලින්. Sigma x is 42 divided by 6, right? So what would be your final answer? 45 divided by 6, right? Supposed to get around 8.8. Let me work it out. 45 divided by 6, right? Negative into negative becomes positive, right? Plus 0.185 into 42 divided by 6, right? 0.8795. So just keep it as 0.8. Okay. So your final answer here would be to the what? Your final answer would be y equals a plus bx formula. This is what you have just learned as the least square regression line, right? So a කියන එක වෙනුවට you are writing 8.8. Instead of a, you are writing 8.8. Instead of b, I am writing 0.185 x. This is your final answer. Okay. So it's, to work out a question like this, it's just a matter of knowing the steps. You can work it out easily, right? So you need to know how to, the fact that you need two columns extra, right? The fact that you need to add all these downwards. Then to substitute these numbers where they belong, that is where your skill is required, right? And guys, the good news is, even though these formulas look complicated, these are all given in your exam. You don't have to buy hard this stuff. You will get this with your exam paper, right? So it's just a matter of knowing where these bits and pieces fits in the formula. My formula components sticker, if you are comfortable with that, it's just a matter of putting the numbers where they belong, right? Then your answer pops up right away. Okay. So now that is the answer for this question, right? And the last part is that you're supposed to do a forecast, right? If you look at this question, first part is developing the least square regression line. The second part is expected customer rating if he sold 20 dishes in this particular week, right? May dishes කියන එක පුතා denote කරන්නේ x variable එකෙන්. It is denoted by variable x, right? So if you substitute 20 as your x variable, you are supposed to get an answer for your y variable, right? If I explain it in another way, follow me like this, right? Check this out. මෙතන මේ x කියන එක වෙනුවට, which denotes the number of dishes, right? If you substitute 20, you will get an answer for y, right? Y equals 8.8 minus 0.185x, right? So instead of x, if you put 20, you are getting a y answer, right? What is Y? Y කියන්නේ මෙතන මොකක්ද? Question එකේ Y means the customer satisfaction rating. Am I right? Okay. So if you substitute 20 instead of X, your answer would be what? This is the answer for section 2. Part 2. This is part 1, right? So 8.8 minus negative 0.185. Instead of X, I'm going to write 20. This thing right? So what would be your answer in that case? Negative 0.185 multiplied by 20. Okay. 8.8 minus that answer, you are getting Y equals 12.5. Sorry. Sorry. No. It can't be 12, right? It has to be lesser than 8.8, obviously. So, 8.8 minus 0.185 multiplied by 20. Okay. 5.1. Okay. That's much better. 5.1 should be your customer satisfaction rating if you solve 20 dishes, right? So here, what did we just do? Just to recap, they are talking about selling 20 dishes, right? Dishes is the X variable. So instead of X, you put 20 and you get an answer for Y from that formula, right? Y is the customer satisfaction. That is precisely what the examiner wants you to forecast, right? Expected rate, customer rate, satisfaction rate. Customer satisfaction rate is the Y variable, right? So simply by substituting that number to your least square regression line function, you can arrive at the expected satisfaction rate or the score using that formula, right? So Buddha, even in your exam, this is also one of those questions that I say that they are going to test for sure, right? Maybe your variables will not be the same as number of dishes and customer satisfaction, right? Then X and Y කියන columns they get in numbers and the column titles would be different in your paper, obviously, right? But the question that they would ask would be precisely this, right? Calculate the least square regression line, and based on that, you are supposed to forecast based on the X variable, right? So this is exactly what you can expect in your exam. So practice these type of questions. There's a lot in our videos. There are plenty of resources available for you guys before you sit for the exam, right? I'm also available on your WhatsApp groups. You can bug me anytime, right? So what matters is you guys get familiarized with these concepts. So this would be a breeze in your exam because you know this is what you will get in your question, right? So that's the end of the target questions for today's session, right? I know I spend a little extra time, not a little, a lot of extra time, right? So, but I hope that that was beneficial for you guys, right? So now I will just have a look at the chat, right? If there's anything, just send me a message. This is the open session for you, right? Any doubts you have, any areas you want me to discuss, any concerns regarding your calculator, right? Anything on that effect, you can raise it in the chat. So I will stay on the call for a moment for those, right? So you can raise those in the chat. And of course, that concludes our session. So all the very best for your exam. I'm sure you guys will do very well in the exam. So as I said, make sure you are studying on these focus areas. Anything that you are not familiar with, focus on those specific things. You can get through with flying.